I need to let you in on a little secret. I have landed interviews and job offers at tech companies and startups that I have never submitted an application to. Even when I had no experience in tech, at companies where I knew no one, and also after being unemployed for several months, both last year and in 2020 when the job market was way worse than it is today. If you're wondering, Hannah, how is that even possible? You're lying. It's because I cold messaged strangers to ask for informational interviews, also known as coffee chats, and then I ended up getting referrals, interviews, and job offers. I made a video a few weeks ago about how I pivoted into tech, where I talked about how I planned my job search strategy, wrote my resume, and asked for coffee chats, and a lot of you had more questions about coffee chats. So I'm making this video to break it all down, and I'm going to tell you exactly how to approach informational interviews, why you should do them, how to ask for them, who to ask, what you actually say in them, how to follow up and hopefully land that referral or job offer without sounding like a robot or a desperate person begging for a job. Because a lot of you are worried about that, and I get it. First of all, why are coffee chats important? 3 reasons. Anywhere from 70 to 80% of jobs are never posted online. I was shocked when I found this out. It means that they're being filled by people internally who already work at the company, someone the hiring manager or the hiring team knows, or other people referred by employees of the company. This is especially the case at startups where they don't have a huge recruiting team or a lot of resources to dedicate to hiring, and the teams are also really small, so they need to be intentional and make sure that the person they're hiring is well vetted, and the best way to do that is through a referral or someone the team already knows. The second reason is if you're someone pivoting from a different industry and you're submitting your resume through the regular channels, it might not get picked up because it doesn't look like you have the transferable skills for tech and startups. In my last video, I talked a little bit about how you can improve your resume and make sure you sound like someone who can do the job, but sometimes that's just not enough, and informational interviews are the best way to get your foot in the door and show someone that you are able to do the job. It's a great way to let your nonlinear experience shine. And the third reason for coffee chats is honestly, it's a great way for you to reverse interview the company. You can get a realistic perspective on the job or the company, because sometimes you might think you want to work somewhere and do a job because it looks great on paper, but there's nothing like hearing from someone who's actually in the seat to know whether it's even a right fit for you. And just to share my own experience with you, last year when I was job searching, I was looking both at big tech and startups, and 2 out of my 3 job offers came from initial coffee chats with people I did not know. One was at a big tech company with over 10,000 employees, and one was at a smaller startup with about 1,000 employees. And even when I was first pivoting to tech and startups a few years ago, I used coffee chats mainly as a way to get to know the differences between different roles in tech, like what does a product manager do versus a product marketer, the differences between working at a big tech versus a startup. And a lot of those connections at the time weren't actively hiring, but they connected me with other people, stayed in touch on LinkedIn so I could see future roles, and it definitely helped in the process as well. But I will also be transparent with you, coffee chats are not a quick win or a quick hack. One of the job offers I landed last year through a coffee chat took months of following up, getting connected with one of their coworkers, hearing that there wasn't a role, but that they'll keep me in mind. And then finally, when a role opened up, I was already top of mind and they asked me to interview. And obviously, there were a lot of messages that I sent to people asking for coffee chats that never got replies. So if you're actively searching and need a job like tomorrow, just know that coffee chats aren't the only thing you should be doing. It should be part of your strategy, especially in a bad economy when every job opening has a million applications. You need a different way to stand out and reach the hiring manager or the recruiter. Okay, now that you know why coffee chats are important, let's dive in. Here's the exact playbook I wish I had when I was doing coffee chats for the first time. And throughout these steps, I'm going to talk about a couple different types of coffee chats. One is when you're interested in a specific role or an opening, which is probably what most of you are interested in. And then when you're interested in a company in general, even when there might not be a specific role. And then more generally, when you're interested in getting advice from someone with a similar career path, or more generally, when you're trying to get advice from someone who made a career transition you're interested in, or for some other reason. Let's start with the most important part, your strategy or who you should reach out to. First, let's figure out your goals. What are you hoping to accomplish with your coffee chat? Are you actively job seeking and interested in a specific role that someone posted? If this is you, you're going to want to start by doing a search on LinkedIn or other job platforms like Wellfound or YC for startups, or just Google openings that fit your interests. In my last video, I talked about the importance of having a mission statement when you do a job search, where you get really specific and have something like, I want to be a fintech product manager at a Series A startup in New York, to guide your entire job search. I talk more in that video about how to get here, but let's just assume that that is your mission statement for the sake of an example. And if you search for all jobs on LinkedIn, let's say, that fit that job description, you can often see job openings that will highlight the hiring manager or the recruiter for that role. This isn't always easy, and sometimes if you search posts instead of job postings, you can also search the name of the company, the role, and hiring in quotations to see if you can find someone who posted about the role, which is usually the hiring manager. My other tip here is that sometimes recruiters will post the role or be associated with it in a job posting, but so many of the times they are overwhelmed with DMs. So I would try to find someone who seems like the hiring manager or just someone who even works on that team. Going back to our goal setting and strategy, if you are trying to get advice or mentorship from someone with a similar career path to you or who has done something you want to do, you're going to want to think about what criteria you're interested in. For example, sticking with our example of wanting to be a fintech product manager, let's say you work in finance now and you want to transition to being a fintech product manager. I would start by looking for people who also worked as a banker and then jumped into fintech, or add your alma mater or a company you worked at before and find people who were alums. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a second, but these types of advice coffee chats are usually some of the easiest to land because most of the time you don't have an agenda that's specifically oriented around a job opening. You're genuinely there because you want to learn about their background, get their advice, and you're usually looking for people 1 to 2 levels up from you, so they're not super senior. And from my experience as someone with a nonlinear career who's done a lot of different jobs, I usually look for these types of people because I find that they're really willing to share their experience. Like one time a girl around my age reached out to me on LinkedIn. I did not know her, but she was interested in such a specific part of my journey that I'm also really passionate talking about. So we had a coffee chat and she stayed in touch and that was awesome. Okay, last part of strategy, who you should reach out to is if you're interested in a specific company, but there aren't roles necessarily posted, but you want to learn more, here's what you should do. Going back to our example of wanting to work at a Series A fintech startup in New York, and this is the case with a lot of startups because they don't always post roles, I would start by looking up companies that fit your mission statement. You can look at Crunchbase, PitchBook for startups, or honestly, tell ChatGPT what your mission statement is and it can look for jobs for you. But that being said, for earlier series, especially pre-seed, seed, some of these databases / ChatGPT aren't always accurate. I would even look at sources like TechCrunch News on who's raised money, Access Pro Rata, or TopStartups.io. I'll link these down below, or YC to see which startups have recently raised money. And just search these companies on LinkedIn to figure out who you can speak to. I would obviously look for people in roles adjacent to what you might be interested in. So if you're interested in product, look for a head of product or a product manager. And obviously your goals can overlap too. You might be interested in a specific role at a company, but then see the hiring manager and be really interested in their background as well. It's even better when these goals overlap. But in all of these cases on who you should be reaching out to, you need to prioritize first and foremost people you have connections to. So people you might be already connected to on LinkedIn or first and second degree connections. You can also use filters to find people. So I generally try to prioritize people who went to the same school as me, are from the same town, worked in the same industry or company, anything that's relevant to your path. And no, this isn't just a prestige thing like, oh, if I went to a better school, there's gonna be more people. Yes, that's true, but you can also look for people who are from the same country as you, had a similar career path, are also a woman in a male-dominant industry. These are just a few examples, but this tip is really important because that's just how human brains work. If 10 people are reaching out to me, I am obviously gonna pick that person that I already feel connected to or affiliated with in some way. The other tip I have on selecting who to reach out to is use your judgment when it comes to super senior people. What I mean by that is if you see a customer success role you're interested in at a big tech company, maybe you don't reach out to their SVP of customer success because that person is probably not the hiring manager and is probably not going to respond to you. But that's totally different for startups because if you see a Series A startup that's hiring for customer success, the hiring manager probably is the head of customer success, if not even the co-founder or COO, because that's probably the person making the decisions. There aren't that many people at a startup. Okay, number 2, once you figured out who to reach out to, this is where things can get a little weird and you might feel decision paralysis. What should I write? I don't want to send that message. What if they don't respond? What if they don't want to talk to me? I experience these feelings all the time and I've sent like a million of these messages. So I totally get it and I'm gonna make this really, really easy for you. Basically, you don't want to reach out to them and say something like, hi, I'm Hannah. I'm interested in this product manager role you posted. Here's my resume. Bye. Because if they're a stranger, why would they refer you? What does work is genuine curiosity and a personalized approach that shows you really did your homework and you're really interested in their background, their team, or their company. Here is exactly what I'd send if I see an open role that I'm interested in. Let's go through what this message does well. It is short and to the point. If somebody already posted a role, you do not need to beat about the bush and say that you want to learn about their experience. They know that they posted a job and people are going to DM them about it, especially if it's a hiring manager or recruiter. This message also prompts you to highlight what you have in common, a mutual connection, an affiliation, whatever that might be. If you saw them post something on LinkedIn recently, share that. Basically, you just want to show them that you're not copy pasting this and sending it to a million people. This message is also being respectful of their time. A lot of people don't do this, and in fact, I have never heard someone say this on a guide to coffee chats, but I always give people a specific time slot or general time period I'm free. This just reduces their their decision paralysis. If you want to read about this, there is a lot in behavioral economics about how giving people a default makes them make a decision quicker. Like, this is literally science, guys. On the other hand, if you want to reach out to someone for career advice or mentorship, send something like this. Don't worry, I'll share all the variations on these templates for you to download so you don't have to screenshot them. And I'm also going to include the LinkedIn DM or email subject lines that you should use. This one's a bit longer because I fleshed it out with real examples that are super specific and tailored to that person, so they know that I didn't copy paste and send a mass message. You could probably make it even shorter, and ChatGPT can help you edit these. And lastly, this is how I would reach out to someone from a company that I'm interested in, but there isn't necessarily a specific role. Again, it could probably even be shorter. I'm just fleshing it out so you can see the types of variation there are, and it doesn't necessarily have to just be 2 sentences. A couple tips that apply to all of these, I mentioned this, but using AI is really great to help refine these messages, but just make sure that they still sound like you. And timing on when to send these messages isn't the most important thing if they're genuinely good messages, but I find that sending later in the week, like Wednesday or Thursday in the afternoons or during lunchtimes, generally work, because that's when people are most likely to be scrolling on LinkedIn or just have time to respond. And another question I get sometimes is, should you be sending these messages on LinkedIn or trying to find their email? And honestly, I usually just do LinkedIn. A lot of people at tech companies and startups don't use email a ton. I am definitely guilty of this. And it's really easy to message people on LinkedIn, especially if you have LinkedIn Premium, which I definitely think is worth the investment. And another thing is, it's not always that easy to find people's emails. Even if you didn't want to pay for LinkedIn Premium, you'd end up having to pay for a service like Rocket Reach or Apollo.io to find people's emails. So just stick with LinkedIn. 9 times out of 10, it's better than email. Another tip is, if they don't respond, follow up. I would usually wait a week and say something like, hi, totally understand if a call isn't convenient right now. If you're open to it, I'd love to ask you a few questions over email. Thanks in advance. And if you want to see examples of bad messages I have personally received, see my video on landing tech jobs. This is tea. Okay, now that they say yes to your coffee chat, hopefully, what do you actually say on the call? This is the part a bunch of you wanted to know more about on my last video. What should I say? How do I not sound desperate? What if I get nervous? And I'm gonna let you in on a secret that is gonna change your mindset when it comes to coffee chats. It's not an interview. Repeat that after me. It is not an interview. So you don't have to feel like you're being chased by a bear, because yes, that's how I feel when I have an interview. So the goal here is not to impress them, it's to learn from them. And by being genuinely curious, you're gonna impress them anyway. Here is how I structure all of my coffee chats, regardless of whether they're 15 minutes or 30 minutes. In the first 2 or 3 minutes, I usually wait for them to join, chit chat, ask them where they're based, how their week's going. If we have some kind of shared connection or mutual affiliation, I always talk about that. It's just a good warm up. Act like a human being, be normal, be nice. And then you're gonna introduce yourselves, tell them why you wanted to chat to them, and guide them through the agenda you have in mind. So super simple, using that fintech example I have been going through, I'd say something like, thanks again for making time in your busy week. I'm a product marketing manager on Google's payments team interested in moving to a fintech startup. I saw that you made a similar transition to Ramp, a company I'm really excited about. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background and making that pivot. And then I have a few specific questions I'd love to get your advice on. And then they'll probably say that that sounds good and introduce themselves. You can also tell them a little bit more about your background, like where you went to school or where you grew up, especially if that's relevant and something you have in common. And then I will go into specific questions. So using that Google to fintech example again, here are some of the questions I would ask if I wanted to learn about a specific opening. Here are some questions I would ask if I wanted to learn about their background or get their advice and mentorship. Here are some questions I would ask if I wanted to learn about their company. Those are just a few starting points, but general tips are, don't ask generic questions you could easily Google. Don't ask them outright for a job or referral. If you're inquisitive, curious, genuine, you are not going to sound desperate. And also leave room for spontaneity. If a question comes up in your mind as they're talking, ask it. Those are usually some of the best questions. I would also use ChatGPT to help you generate ideas. I don't have a specific prompt, but just input your background, the person you're speaking to's background, and ask for thoughtful, specific questions that can help you learn more either about a specific role, their company, or just their background. And then at the end of the call, thank them. If based on what you found out, you like their role, you like their company, ask something like, what would you suggest as a next step if I'm interested in a product manager role at your company? If they don't necessarily offer to refer you or there are no openings, ask if they'd be willing to connect you with someone else at the company or share other resources, or just if it's okay for you to stay in touch. Okay, number 4, we are almost at the end here, but following up. This is super important because coffee chats are not just a one and done thing, especially if you ask to stay in touch at the end of your call. Following up is not going to be awkward, and it's going to be a great starting point to building a relationship. So regardless of what their response was at the end of your call, if they offered to give you a referral when there's an opening, pass your contact to someone else, or just shared more resources and was genuinely helpful in the call, always send a thank you note. I usually do this a couple hours after the call, and don't overthink it. Don't make it super serious, professional, and crazy. It should just be a few lines and something like this. That's how you stay on their radar without being annoying. And if you sent them a message on LinkedIn, you're probably already connected. So that's also a great way to stay in touch and follow up. If they post something, you can like it, you can comment. It's a great conversation starter. If they introduce you to someone else, always close the loop. Tell them how that conversation went and thank them again. And if you eventually eventually land a role, whether it's at that company or at a different company, definitely update them. Who knows, they might even end up asking you for a referral someday. Okay, number 5, this is the last thing I want to talk about, playing the long game. I think a challenge a lot of people run into with coffee chats is that they'll do a couple and it doesn't bear fruit, so they give up because they think nothing came out of this. I definitely get how that happens because you don't usually see the results from doing this right away. But one time I got connected to someone for a job I was interested in. I cold messaged them on LinkedIn, and then nothing came out of that initial coffee chat, but we stayed connected on LinkedIn. I would like their messages, I would like and comment on their posts, and it's been really cool to see the companies they worked at since then, and some of them are actually ones I could be interested in. So that's just a way the connection can pay off down the road. And on playing the long game, I am also not going to be that person who, oh, you should follow up regularly with everyone you have a coffee chat with. You should have a personal CRM, send them articles you read, etc. That is just not realistic. And honestly, if someone did that to me after they had one coffee chat with me, I would think they're insane or literally a bot. So it's a fine line. And what I think the better thing to do is focus on bigger milestones. For example, a girl I spoke to almost a year ago asked me about going to business school and asked me for my advice on going to business school. And she updated me a few weeks ago that she got in and thanked me for my advice. She didn't necessarily stay in touch during that year, but I love that update because it felt really good for me to know that I helped someone. And so if a year from now she reaches out asking me about recruiting from business school, I am more likely than not to respond or help her in some way because I remember that. The same person who asked to speak to me also highlighted that we had mutual friends. So she was really hitting all the boxes here. The other thing to remember on playing the long game is that the world of tech and startups can feel really small. So you never know who you're going to encounter or maybe work with again. So that's an incentive to stay in touch and not just completely ghost the other person without being overbearing and following up with them every other week, because you just don't need to be doing that. Lastly, just to wrap it up, now you know why coffee chats are important, who to reach out to, how to follow up, and play the long game to get connections, referrals, job offers, and interviews, and hopefully job offers. The last thing I just want to emphasize is that informational interviews are not about asking for a job, even though that might be an indirect benefit. They're about understanding if someone's path is right for you, learning what it actually takes to succeed in a role or a company, getting insider context that the internet is not going to tell you, and building a network of real humans who one day might be your coworkers, mentors, or advocates. And the funny thing is, once you shift your mindset, I need a job, to building connection, that's probably when you're gonna get the referral, the interview, and the job offer. And coffee chats are especially helpful if you're pivoting into something new where you need to get those insider insights, get in front of someone even if you don't have that perfect on paper resume, and really learn how someone made a transition that you're interested in making. So here's your toolkit on coffee chats. I'm gonna link more resources down in the comments. So follow me for more advice and tips on pivoting and growing your career, especially in tech. And don't forget to just send the message.